Hello, this is Natalie Zacharias, intending your spirit, and I would like to welcome you to episode 6 of the Cosmic Earth Conversations. I'm here with my dear friend Xander, who's an amazing being, and I'm so excited to introduce you to them. And Xander, before we start anything, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share whatever is on your heart.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie, for having me. I'm so excited. I am Xander. I am a queer, fat, non-binary, trans, femme, witch, astrologer, artist. Currently I live in the Blue Ridge Mountains on unceded Cherokee lands, but I've lived around the country throughout the last many, many years. And right now I get to enjoy the beautiful view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And um, yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm happy that we were able to connect today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Whenever Xander is my astrology expert that I go to, like, and so whenever I was telling them, but before we were starting this episode, I was like feeling into like what is it that wants to come through, and what a beautiful moment that I didn't realize this till maybe yesterday. I'm like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. Like, how appropriate
Yeah.
for for us to connect
Uh-huh.
and chat and create this episode together. So, yeah, I know before you were saying that you pulled a card for today, and I would love if you would share what is there, and we'll start the conversation from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I I also should say that I practice under the name Indigo Moon Artist, so you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and my webpage, in Indigo Moon Artist. But this morning I was doing a meditation and sitting at my altar, and I pull a card every single day, and I work with the Slow Holler deck, which is this beautiful deck that's the book of the deck.
Yes.
Um, and Slow Holler is a queer collective that has taken the patriarchy and the hierarchy out of the tarot. And so I work with this deck for my own personal practice. And so I was pulling a card of like, okay, well, what
Cool.
wants to come through for today in this conversation? And I pulled the architect of stones,
Oh,
which
nice.
I love. I love this card.
That's
And
so cool.
and so the Architect of Stones by the Slow Holler is ground yourself in the present while forever imagining elsewhere. Build temples, regrow rainforests, make enough food for everyone who shows up. You have what it takes to sustain you and your community. The Architect of Stones is a conductor of the physical world. Have you ever met someone who seems to be able to build or fix anything or play any instrument they pick up, or who grasps how machines work just by looking or tinkering with them? That's the architect, the epitome of the hands-on learner. Beyond a mere facility with tools and instruments, the architect has cracked the secret of working with material forces, which is resistance. The earth element is the only one that requires collaborating with the physical reality as both an obstacle when metal rusts, when paint dries in the tube, when the knife slips, and a co-creator. It is the element of resistance of the world pushing back as you try to assert your vision and your will. The architect has learned to celebrate. When you pull the architect, know that your visions can come to fruition, your projects can succeed, and you can do the seemingly impossible as long as you respect the challenges along your path and invite them to collaborate with you.
Mm,
Hmm.
that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's so much medicine in that.
Yeah, this is such an amazing deck, and it came with this beautiful, uh,
I love that.
yeah, altar cloth. So, so I like to work with this deck because it makes me feel really connected to my queer self and my queer community, but also through this lens of being rooted in the earth and doing spiritual work. So I love that deck.
What is when did you start your practice of like pulling cards? I'm always curious of like people's like what prompts them to. I don't have as consistent of a practice, but when I
Yeah.
sit like where I'm, the place where I am right now recording this, it actually is the place where I'll sit and have tea. When I have tea, I'll pull cards and there's like plants around. It's like a really like this one section of my space that feels very um I don't know the right word for it. It's like presence, but like deep presence. Um, and so I'm curious, like when did you start pulling cards? Like what prompted you to do that?
Yeah. Um, so for me, so I grew up going to a metaphysical camp,
Mhm.
and I grew up in a holistic household. My mom is a numerologist and is an acupressurist and does a lot of healing work. So I grew up with the woo, the metaphysical, the spiritual. That was something that's always been part of my life, which I've been really, really, really grateful for. Um, but for me, it was like a slow build into my own personal practice.
Mhm.
And I got much deeper into my own personal practice of woo, and whatever that means, pulling tarot, learning astrology, following astrology, um, doing Reiki, doing energy work, working with crystals. That got much stronger in 2012.
Mm.
And in 2015, it just kind of all like collided.
Mm.
That's not the right word. It just like it was a culmination. It was just like, oh, you have arrived. Like this needs to be a daily practice.
Mhm.
So even though it was something that was always around me, and then I started to kind of like tinker and examine and look and like be more present with it in 2012.
Mhm.
2015 was really when everything became a daily practice. So I bought this deck. This deck came out at the tail end of 2015, I believe.
Okay.
And earlier in that year, I had taken a tarot class from a dear friend of mine, and I learned about Pixie Smith, who was the illustrator um, of the Rider Waite deck,
Mm.
and she is often forgotten. She was an amazing artist. Anyone who's seen the Rider Waite Pixie Smith deck knows her brilliance, but
Mhm.
she's often forgotten. And so
Mhm.
she died penniless in an unmarked
Mhm.
grave,
That's awful.
and people tend to not know who she is, whereas they know Ryder and they know Wait,
Right.
these two men. And so I got to kind of
Those are like the classic tarot cards, right?
hmm
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so I had a couple of decks prior to this one, but nothing really really fit until I
Yeah.
got this deck.
Yeah.
And then I've just been pulling a card most days since 2015, and then it's a daily practice for the last probably year and a half, 2 years.
Cool. Wait,
Yeah,
I have a few questions. So
yeah,
when you say you went to a okay, let me see if I can try that word. Metaphysical camp.
uh-huh.
Like, do you mean like you went to like a camp as a kid? Like some kids go to like summer camp and like, whoa, that is so cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I went to a summer camp from ages 12 to 16, and then worked there from 18 onward. So it's been something that's been part of my life
That
since the
is
age of
so cool.
12. Um, yeah, where we would wake up and do a meditation every single day, every single morning. Um, we do. Um, Work with chakras. We do
Wow.
past life regressions, akashic
Wow.
records.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's
Wow.
always been part of my life.
That's so cool because there's I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was episode 3 when I was talking to my mentors, Bodhi and Amala. We were talking about rites of passages, and I think I can't remember I feel like when I did episode 4, also that conversation of rites of passage came up again. And I'm imagining like, well, I'm curious if they did have any rites of passage um, entwined in that camp, um, or if that camp was in itself a rites of passage. Um, so if I guess answer that, if you can answer that question first, and then I'll go to the second part of that question.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a coming home. It was a great community for me to be able to learn how to meditate. That
Yeah,
is something that has been, um, it's been a practice for me now for nearly 30 years.
yeah.
And I'm still not the best meditator.
I don't know if it's like a best thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Feels like
not
it's
one
very
who
good
can
at
just
like you
like,
don't try, you just do, or something like that.
yeah, it's something that I tend to meditate when I'm actively doing something. So
Hmm.
going on a walk, or baking or listening to music, or dancing, things like that.
Yeah,
Something that has some sort of physical component. Whereas, just like the sitting and closing the eyes, that doesn't work for me so well, but
yeah,
it's been something that I've been able to practice since the age of 12, and so that feels really amazing
yeah,
that I've had that, and that I was always surrounded by people who worked with crystals or who were astrologers or who worked with the tarot or
yeah.
who did Reiki. I mean, that's just always been my life,
That's so cool.
and it feels really true to who I am. So
Yeah, yeah. That's so beautiful because like just imagining those years. I mean, when I was growing up, um, were you in the New York area at the time?
no, so I was born in New York, but then moved to Missouri as a child. So I
No,
grew up in
great.
Missouri, but this camp was in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So it's
Oh,
actually really
cool.
close to
Of
where I
course.
live now. Yeah.
Well, because I was gonna say is like because I grew up in New Jersey and so on Lenni Lenape lands, and uh, I guess around probably at the same time, around 12, 13, I was introduced to energy healers, particularly, well, first there was Reiki masters. I went to a Catholic school and one of the religion teachers was a Reiki master, and then one of my best friend's mother was a Reiki master and a Buddhist. And then so that came into my life. And then very soon after, um, we used to go visit this like adorable Puerto Rican woman who read uh, tarot cards. And I remember, so that was like kind of my intro, but it was not very like, as you're describing, like, oh, it's like that feels like a very held way to be introduced to all of this, like, really supportive, at least for me, they feel very supportive to like life.
Hmm.
It's like tools that are like very in alignment with nature and with like the rhythms of life, and just imagining like the impact that would have for any teenager, you know
Yeah.
like those are flipping hard years.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that like that lack of having rites of passages makes it even harder. And then I mean I can't even imagine being a teenager um in this like time that we're living in. And at the same time there's teenagers that have completely blown my mind, so it's like
Mhm.
that, holding both realities existing. But yeah, I'm just so excited that is something that exists. And of course,
Yeah.
it exists in Blue Ridge Mountains, like duh. Um, and also, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. These mountains are magical. They are deep. These mountains are part of, um, so during the time of Pangea, when all the land masses were together, this mountain range met up with the Himalayas, and so when Pangea split,
Mm,
then that created the chasm. The tectonic plates burst the Himalayas to like grow really, really,
mm,
really big, and then these are some of the most ancient, oldest mountains in the world. And there's a river here that is called the French Broad, which is a colonizer name from, the French who came and colonized. And perhaps the name of the river that the Cherokee called it. There were 3 different names. Those names are escaping me right now, but I can find them somewhere in my notes. But yeah, these mountains hold a lot of the same minerals, and this water holds a lot of the same minerals as does the Himalayas. And so this is just a really, really mineral rich, very sacred land, very spiritual land. And there's a lot of quartz in this land, a lot of mica, a lot of kyanite, which is a really soothing, calming stone. There's a lot of garnet in these mountains. So it's just it's a pull, it's an energy pull for people who are doing spiritual work, whatever that means for them, tend to come down here in this area because it's just got such calming, grounding energy.
So cool. The Blue Ridge Mountains are part of the Appalachian mountain range, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
I have you ever gone to the caverns there?
To the caverns?
Yeah.
No.
I have I went because I have family who live there. My godparents live in Virginia, but on those mountains. And I remember I have this vivid memory as a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, going to the caverns. I think they're called the Laurel Caverns. They're more in Virginia, I believe, in the Shenandoah Valley. But those, I've been wanting to go as an adult because, as a child, I was always very open to a lot of things. But I'm curious now with what I know, what that experience would be like. And as you're talking about the Himalayas, I just found myself wondering, I just have a lot of I have more curiosities now than than when we began this conversation, which isn't surprising. There's a lot there.
Yeah, I think those caverns, I think they're the Luray Caverns.
Luray, that's it.
Yeah, I not grew up, but I lived in Baltimore on Piscataway land for over a decade, and the Luray Caverns is close-ish to Baltimore, and so I was like, one day, but I never made it. So one day I will go and visit those caverns.
It's literally anytime I ever drive from New Jersey down to Roanoke, Virginia, I always pass it and be like, I've been there. I need to go there again. There's also a natural bridge somewhere around there.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. I don't know if I've ever been to the natural bridge, but yeah, those caverns, as you speak about the different minerals that are in the different crystals that are in those mountain ranges. And I just think of I think if I remember correctly, I'm always thinking of the little people that live all around the lands and who they are. And if I remember correctly, I feel like the Cherokee knew about 11 different nations of little people that exist in that area. And so it just makes me wonder, I just have a lot of curiosities. What else is there? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is I was listening to YouTube yesterday, a video, and it was with Liv Mokai-Wheeler and Andrew Bartzes, I think is his name. He's a galactic historian, and when you were talking about 2015 and how that really shifted for you, in that video he was talking about how we entered into a different part of the galaxy in 2015 that had more light. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that's what he said. It was 2015. So I found myself I wonder if that, because 2015 for me was a really huge year. That's had in the beginning of 2015, I moved to California to go start my master's program, and then just like this whole world opened up to me outside of school of like basically like spiritual school is probably the best way to describe it. And very
Mhm.
accelerated like growing, and as you're talking about your experience, I'm like, oh, I wonder. And then I was like, wait, I remember, I think Andrew said something about 2015 being when we traveled to a different part of the galaxy that just has more light, I think is what he said in that conversation. Yeah, I feel like that's what it was, but it's just that just
That's
came out for me as you were sharing.
that's awesome.
And which I feel like is a great segue to what I was hoping you would share about today, particularly because again we are like talking during Mercury retrograde, and I feel like it's becoming more mainstream. People talking like, "Oh, is Mercury in retrograde?" Like my sister is a high school teacher, and like she's even told me stories of like her students being like, kind of like joking, but like, what is that kind of type of thing?
Uh-huh.
And so I know in the past I've always been like, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, but now I'm kind of like, be more present, like slow down a little bit more, be more aware.
Yeah.
And so I would love if you would share not even just about Mercury retrograde, but all the things that are happening cosmically, and why astrology is so helpful, for understanding or conceptualizing how we as humans on planet Earth are, you know, part of a bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And before I get
Lit up.
there, I love talking astrology. I could do it all day long, and often I do. Before I get there, I want to find the names for the French Broad River, just because that feels like it would be really, really honoring. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
grab that real fast.
cool.
I wrote a poem about it recently, so I have the names. Um,
I love that you have the names because I feel like it's so um, important to reclaim the
mhm,
um, and honor the original peoples of the lands that like granted I was born here, but like my ancestors don't come from this land, and so even though this part of the earth called me into an existence, into this lifetime, like I'm also very much aware that like, and I'm a steward of this land, and in honor and in respect to the Lenni Lenape people who are the original stewards of this land. And so I've been like doing research and finding, like it's not New Jersey is a colonizer name. Like what's the actual name of this land?
mhm,
And I am going to I'm gonna pronounce it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, um, but in this word I'm about to say, what it means is like the land between waters,
mm,
because New Jersey is between the Delaware River and the Atlantic Ocean. So I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but phonetically looks like it's pronounced Shiyebji.
okay.
Shiyebji. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm also like, that's not how you say it. Like, because I feel like, no, not quite.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I was like, first off, would love to learn how to pronounce the words correctly. But I think it's really important for all of us to have that like awareness of the curiosity to like, what are these
Yeah.
these names.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah, because yeah, like the Delaware River, New Jersey, the French Broad, like
Mhm.
those are such colonized names. Um and so I may also mispronounce this, and my intention is not to, um but the there were many indigenous nations who lived here in the Asheville area, but the Cherokee was and is the most prominent. And so from the Cherokee language, there is it's the Zilicoa is one of the names for the French Broad. The Takiosti,
Mm.
that Takiosta, Takiosta is translated to where the waters race, and the Piolico Agiqua um, is where it describes the girth of the waters. And I can read the poem if you would like me to.
Sure.
I wasn't planning on it, but but it's coming up. So I'm going to read this poem. I wrote this. I channel a lot of poems. They just tend to come to me, and when they do, I write them down. So this one was written on November 30th of 2020 at 5:13 in the morning. And I'm calling it Swelling and Eclipsed because it came to me during an eclipse. So this is the poem, Swelling and Eclipsed. Rain is falling throughout the night on the morning of the eclipse. The creek near my bed feels louder, and I found myself drifting to Keys Current. Turkey Creek, adorned with rafters and mist, feeds the Tangibly, where the waters race. These waters are the oldest on the earth. The folds and the faults of the Blue Ridge within the mountains of the southern Appalachia once were embedded with the ridges of the Himalayas. When the fault lines cracked, splitting the land and ocean separating their embrace, eruptions of oceanic volcanoes pushed the siblings apart. This created the mountain peaks to emerge as a symbol and a scar. Within our pockets, we find each other's pebbles. Tidal waves and submergences, collisions and magnetic currents shaped the riverbeds and the ridges, these mountains filled with mica, garnet, and quartz. And we find ourselves honoring one of the oldest waters on the earth. The Cherokee ancestors had many names for this ancient sacred water, of which we only remember a few: the Zilicoa, the Takiosta, and the Piolicoapiqua. These waters flow north. From a Cherokee language, Takiosta is translated to where the waters race, and the Piolicoapiqua describes the girth of the waters. And when the colonizers came, they stole the description of home and generalized Key as broad, and blandly stamped upon the sacred waters the foreign nationalities, the French Broad River, polluted commerce under bypass factories, but these currents of the Takiosti race freely. These waters face north. These waters run north. The three oldest rivers in the world flow north. For 213 miles, this meandering river flows northward to merge to the rivers known as the Holston, the Tennessee, and Mississippi in a confluence of the Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, all waters embrace. Inevitably, all borders erase. And if we skipped a stone from this shoreline, knowingly Key will journey home. In this moment, as the earth sits between the sun and the moon, I'm listening to the rain fill the creek, who feeds the river, who collaborates with the longitude of the land, who satiates the inlet of the narrow mouth, who pours into the belly of an ocean, who is swelling and eclipsed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that is where I'm coming from, is are these lands. And yeah, so talking astrology. So where shall I begin?
Where would you like?
So I'll start with Aquarius, which is the season that we're in right now. So I study tropical astrology. There are many versions of astrology. There is from Western medicine, Western astrology is a tropical lens, which means that we focus on the seasons. And so it is focused on the vernal equinox, or the beginning of Aries, the beginning of spring is the starting point of the tropical zodiac. And then there's also sidereal astrology, which is based on fixed stars or constellations. And so that is from the lens of way out of our planet, the Earth being part of the solar system, which is a group of planets that all orbit around the sun, as we know, and that includes Mercury is the closest, and then Venus, and then Earth, and then Mars, and then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto is our solar system. And then our solar system is part of, a galaxy, which is part of, the cosmos. And so it just like gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're just like this tiny, tiny little speck in this large, ginormous cosmos. And everything out there influences us, and everything that we do here influences out there. And so from the lens that I study, that I practice, which is tropical, it is based on our perspective, which is called the geocentric perspective, because it's our lens from Earth out to the cosmos. And it's a practice that is seasonably based. So it starts with spring with Aries, and then goes to summertime, and then fall, and then winter. Whereas sidereal is fixed stars or constellations, and it's our planet within the larger cosmos. And then of course there's so many different kinds of astrology. There's Mayan astrology, and so many different indigenous astrologies, and Chinese astrology, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many different lenses. But from my perspective, from the tropical perspective, we are in the season Aquarius. And so right now there are 5 planets in Aquarius. Today that we're recording this is February 1st of 2021, and Venus just moved into Aquarius this morning. And so Venus came to join the sun, who has been there for the last 2-ish weeks, and Mercury, who's been there for the last many weeks, 3-4 weeks, and then Jupiter and Saturn moved together into the sign of Aquarius at the tail end of December. So Saturn moved in on December 16th of 2020, and then Jupiter moved in December 19th, and then the two of them had the big convergence, the big meeting, which was called the Great Conjunction, and also the Great Mutation, which are similar and different, and I can talk about that. But where we'll start is, as we were getting onto this call, I was struck by Natalie's shirt, and I was like, oh, that's such a gorgeous shirt. That's such a beautiful color on you. It just, like, such a beautiful color on you, and it's also a very Aquarian color. So that electric blue is the color that is associated with Uranus, and Uranus is one of the rulers of Aquarius. So Aquarius is ruled, the traditional ruler is Saturn, and then the modern day ruler is Uranus. And so I loved that today, on this day, that Venus, the planet that archetypally represents how we adorn ourselves, our beauty, and how we feel, and love and connection, that you adorned yourself with this electric blue, this very Aquarian blue, and it just felt
totally not on purpose.
Yeah,
literally just like, I'm the type of person I look, I'm like, you, I will wear you. Even though I like keep grabbing my neck because I'm not used to wearing turtlenecks. I'm like, oh. But yeah,
it's so beautiful on you. Yeah. So we are in Aquarius right now, which means that the sun is in Aquarius, and we have a stellium, which is a concentration of many planets in one sign. And so right now we have 5 planets in the sign of Aquarius. So Mercury, which just stationed retrograde a couple of days ago, yesterday, 2 days ago, on the 30th, at the tail end of Aquarius, so at the 26th degree of Aquarius. And then the Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus are tighter in a conjunction. Venus right now is at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Jupiter is at, or Saturn is at 5 degrees of Aquarius. The sun, I believe, is at 12 or 13 degrees of Aquarius. Saturn, Jupiter is at 10 degrees of Aquarius, so they're all really, really, really tight. And then Mercury is at the tail end at 26. So so that's
I
just
should
kind of like,
say that this episode, when it's like for those who are watching it, this episode was again recorded on February 1st. It's not being released on February 1st. So in case you're like listening, you're like, that's not correct. It's like, it is correct for today.
it is correct for today. Yes.
I'll to reiterate that and name that.
Yeah. Yeah. And over the next little while, so when this gets released, all of those planets will still be in Aquarius when this gets released. And then, you know, whenever somebody is watching this, everything will shift and change. But yeah, the sun will still be in Aquarius for another 2+ weeks, so another 18 days. And we know that because the sun is at the 12th degree of Aquarius, and there are 30 degrees in each sign. So 12 plus 18 is 30. So we have 18 more days of Aquarius. And then every single planet moves at its own pace, at its own orbit. And so Venus is the fastest moving. It's just like zipping around the sun, is going just like really, 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 really fast. And this Venus takes, I think, like 86 days or so to go around the sun. So just really, 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 really fast. From our perspective, from our geocentric perspective here on Earth, it takes about a year for the sun to go, for Venus to go around the sun. And then, sorry, Mercury is the closest, Venus is the second closest. And as far as Mercury, it's very Mercury retrograde that I did that. So Mercury is the planet that takes like 86 days to go around. Venus takes like 150 days or something. But Mercury is zipping, zipping, zipping. And so the reason why, from our perspective here on Earth, that Mercury retrogrades or goes backwards is from a geocentric point of view. So no planets ever actually go backwards. But what it means is that Earth and whatever planet that is stationing retrograde is at a similar pace, and then will start to shift. And so then Earth will start to will go around a bend. And so it's kind of like the vantage point is, you can think of like people running around a track. If they're going at the same pace, somebody's on the outer point and is going to has a farther amount to go. And so another way to like visualize that is like two cars who are going the same speed on a highway, and they're both going forward, but then one starts to slow down by like a mile or two. So like this one's going 75 and this one starts to go 72. It looks like the car is going backwards, even though they're still both going forwards. There's a slowing. And so Mercury never goes backwards. No planets ever go backwards. But again, from our perspective here on Earth, the reason why this planet that takes like 80 some odd days to zip around the Earth, and we see it as it takes a year, is because multiple times in a year, that planet will look like it's going backwards. Does that make sense?
You meant it takes 80 something days to zip around the sun.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So Mercury is like 80 some odd.
The example of the runners in the track makes perfect sense, because it looks like when I ran track when I was like middle school or something like that. And the way they set it up is on a diagonal when the racer starts. So everyone actually is at the same, but if you were to start it all at the same like line, it would look, because the person is in the shorter, how it just made sense, that analogy. I'm like, oh yeah. That makes sense. And I think it's really curious, the significance. I feel people are more often aware of Mercury going retrograde. Uh, and I mean, I learned this because, gosh, I must have been 2015 or 2016 when I started understanding that that's a thing that happens, and like it affects me.
Mhm,
I am sure it affected me always. I just didn't have the awareness around it.
mhm.
And I remember I was in grad school, and it was semester was about to start, and my laptop gave me the blue screen of death.
Mm, mhm.
Like Mercury retrograde like just started, and then semester was didn't even start yet, and I panicked. I'm like, ah! And then I remember I was living in a community house. And everyone's like, "Oh, Mercury's retrograde." I'm like, "Great! I still need help."
Right, yeah, my computer is still not working. Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
luckily, I happened to live with an awesome, amazing human named Kenny, who is a magician and a wizard when it comes to tech. And I remember him joking around like, Mercury retrograde's got nothing on me. And I'm like, I love you and I appreciate you. And thank you for saving my life. Because
yeah,
anyone who's in any kind of schooling knows you need your laptop.
very true. Yeah,
And so,
I
yeah, it's curious to me that like out of all the retrogrades, Mercury seems to be the most, I don't know, pronounced, or people are more and more like, oh, this is a thing.
yeah, and that's also, from our how our culture runs,
Mm-hmm.
so all of the planets retrograde, and Mercury is the shortest amount of time.
Mm,
So all of the outer body planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they will retrograde for many, many months at a time, up to 6 months. And so Pluto can be retrograde for 6 months out of the year.
yeah.
And there's always at least one planet retrograde, and sometimes there's five planets retrograde.
Right.
And so we may or may not feel those outer body planets
Yeah.
retrograde, depending on who you are and
Yeah.
also what transits they are affecting within your own personal chart.
Yeah.
But then the planets that are the closer planets, the personal planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Mars, because those are the ones that are the fastest moving and the closest to Earth. When they retrograde, we can definitely feel it.
Mm,
And so Mercury is the planet that retrogrades the most frequently, and also for the shortest period of time. So
mhm.
Mercury stations retrograde for about 3-ish weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, 3 to 4 times a year, and
Okay.
and so it's a short period of time. Whereas then the other two personal planets, Venus and then Mars, who are bookend of Earth, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Um, they retrograde, Venus retrogrades every 18 months for a few months, and then Mars will retrograde every 2.5 years.
Mm,
And so Mercury is happening more frequently.
yeah.
And the reason that we're feeling it is because Mercury archetypally rules technology,
Hmm.
commerce,
Hmm.
um, uh, movement, cars. I mean, that's co-ruled with Mars, but so a lot of our Western culture is
Yeah.
very mercurial. So we need to, jump on a Zoom call, or we need
Right.
to drive, or we need to get onto our computers. Those are all very Mercury things. And so
Mm,
when Mercury stations retrograde, um, then we can feel that, and we
yeah.
can feel it because our culture is so
Yeah.
mercurial.
Yeah.
Whereas, cultures that are more Neptunian would
Right.
feel more the Neptunian retrogrades than the Mercury retrograde.
Yeah. Would you say that retrograde, like that energetic experience, would be like the tension or the challenge? I feel like in some ways, like retrograde. I mean, again, like I mean, I obviously don't have any background in astrology, so it's just like merely like piecing together things. I feel astrology is such. I mean, you already named it, like how vast it is. There's so many different lineages, and it feels just like its own language. And so I like try to piece together, and like retrograde for me, because of how I'm learning, it just feels like it's an invitation to slow down. Like
Mhm,
that's what comes to mind is like, oh, something's retrograde, like slow down, like pause for
mhm,
a second, and that there's the possibility of a challenge or tension or something like that energetically, to do with, whatever, whether it's Mercury or any of the other planets.
mhm.
And as you were saying, like it depends how it lands on your chart, and a lot of other things. Um, but yeah, like would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so so when Mercury stations retrograde, which again we're in currently, um, it's the rule of re's. So anytime there's a retrograde, so like re, so it's resting, it's revisiting, it's reviewing. It is the time to do a lot of those re words,
Mm,
and so it is a time that cosmically, energetically,
mhm.
and perhaps spiritually, depending, on who you are, we're being asked, we, our human bodies, which are also cosmic bodies,
Yeah,
are being asked to rest and to review and to, um, revise things and do the slowing down.
yeah,
But again, we live in Western culture, or at least I live in Western culture. You live in Western culture,
yeah.
um, and like, you know, uh, our job is going to be like, well, we still need you to come in, and rent is still going to be due,
Mhm.
and all of those things. And so our cosmic bodies aren't being able to be in line
Yeah,
with the energy of these planets. And so these little like hiccups will happen,
yeah,
which then force us to slow down.
yeah,
So, we're rushing to get to an appointment, so we jump in our cars and our car won't start.
yeah.
And yeah, that's frustrating, but it's also saying like, oh, well, you need this time to be more present.
Mhm.
And like oftentimes we're not gonna like, "Oh, my car won't start, so I'm just gonna, like, sit and meditate and, like, be really present." It's like, I'm gonna, like, be really anxious and frustrated, and so that's the really lovely thing about astrology
Mm,
becoming more mainstream and more in people's languages, is that it's really an invitation for you, rather than to be like, I'm feeling really frustrated," is to be like, "Oh, yes, Mercury is retrograde, and I'm just gonna pause for a moment,
yeah,
and then I'm going to do the logistical things that I need to do to make this work." And all of the planets are energetic beings, and all of the planets want, some sort of reciprocation, some sort
yeah.
of respect and honoring. And so when you have a mercurial hiccup,
Mhm,
um, then spend a little time honoring Mercury.
mhm.
And so you can do that by being curious and playful and creative, um, and you can just kind of like play with that type of energy.
Yeah,
And so it's an invitation to, one, acknowledge that we are part of this larger system
yeah,
that is so vast, and also how can you be um, part of that energetic exchange.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah, because I think it is so important for us to understand that, that reciprocity. I like that idea of being playful with when there's hiccups, particularly around Mercury retrograde. So I feel like there is that invitation to like, you have a choice in any moment. You can like
Mhm.
lose your shit, or you can actually just like laugh your ass off.
Right, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like keep on going. Even as I was setting up the space, I was like, I had a drink with me, and I was like, oh, I usually like to drink when I'm, doing these episodes. And I was like, today maybe I won't. I'll leave you to the side. Like,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Yeah.
try something new today. And yeah, I am aware that we're closing on almost an hour, and that went right by really fast. I want to name that first.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I would love for you, Xander, to share what you are creating right now in your life. And I know you have some really exciting things that you have been in creation with. And so I'd love to, take a moment, and the mic is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before I get there, I want to say one last thing about Mercury.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, is Mercury is archetypally known as a very androgynous planet. So
Mm,
oftentimes the planets are kind of like gendered. So
mm,
Venus is feminine or female,
mm,
and Saturn is male and masculine. And when it comes to Mercury, Mercury is androgynous, and so
mm,
will be multiple genders, which
mm.
I really enjoy. I tend to take out all of the gender out of the planet. So I don't, rather than like when I'm talking about Venus, I'm not like, and she, I'll use the word
Right.
key, which is, uh, a non-gendered
Yeah.
pronoun.
Yeah.
And, but when it comes to Mercury, mercurial energy, it is very androgynous.
Mm,
And so when Mercury is retrograde, Mercury is known as being a psychopomp, which is one of my favorite words. And a psychopomp is an usher of the newly dead into the underworld. And
oh, wow.
so the reason why so many mercurial things,
Yeah.
technology, um, movement, language, communication,
Uh-huh.
get these hiccups is that Mercury is like, I have my other role, which is now I need to usher
Huh.
these newly dead into the next realm.
Huh.
And so Mercury is this psychopomp energy, and I really love to utilize Mercury retrograde to do my own psychopomp type of work. So working with communicating with the dead, um, through spirit, through channeling, through writing poems, through my dream work, etc. And so that's another invitation, is just to work
Cool.
with psychopomp energy during Mercury retrograde.
Cool. I did not know that. I feel it's funny because I feel like it's very like scorpionic, or Scorpio, but Scorpio is not ruled by Mercury. Um, it's Pluto and Mars, right?
Hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. I didn't learn something new every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I feel like I have so many more questions for you, and I'm like also like, to stay within the time limits. Um, but yeah, if you could just share again, what are some things that you're creating? I want to highlight them and share them out and blast them out into the world. Uh,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yes, so I just launched a 13-week workshop. It's called Pulling Out the Splinters, which is, um, that name comes from a journal entry actually from 2015, where I was working on it was a visualization that came to me of like pulling out these embedded uh, things that are not meant to be in you permanently.
Mm,
And and so throughout 2020 I kept getting the intuition, the download, the message to create this workshop, but it just wasn't time. It wasn't time. And so now it's time. So I've just birthed into the world this workshop called Pulling Out the Splinters. And it's an invitation for folks to um, work with many different energetic modalities
mm,
to pull out some of the trauma that has been happening throughout 2020, because this has been such a pivotal time, and it's a really great time for us to move into the next age, into the age of Aquarius, which we're on the cusp of, move into this revolution and evolution energy, but it is also a time to pull out the things that we don't want in us. And so I'm actually working with you, Natalie. You're going to be doing some emotion code.
Yes.
I'm excited too. And so it's 13 weeks and it's astrologically inspired. So each week will be, we as a collective, it's going to be a very intimate group that, perhaps you, the watcher, will be a part of, is we will astrologically look at the transits that are happening and how to work with that energy to be more present in our bodies and be more present in our physical bodies, but also our spiritual bodies and our emotional bodies and our energetic bodies. And so it's going to be emotion code is one of the weeks. Akashic records is going to be one of the weeks. There's going to be a sidereal astrologer who will be talking about the fixed stars, the constellations. There will be crystal work. There will be movement and yoga and creative writing and art. And it's an invitation to work with many different modalities to become more present in who we are and how to harness this energetic energy. So pulling out the splinters, it starts on March 13th, which is the Pisces new moon, and it's a week before the vernal equinox. So it's this like tail end of winter, birthing of spring, and so it starts on March 13th and it goes through June 5th, and it's every Saturday for 2 hours. We will meet over Zoom. So
Awesome. And I know, based off of what you shared, 2020, I just felt like there was so many things happening planetarily, and it
yeah,
was like, and now like in retrospect, looking, you're like, wow, okay, like things happen, and
yeah,
I feel like you've shared this of like 2021 is also just so many shifts and changes and things like that. So, I like there's a part of me it's like I like kind of like giggle when I see people like when like things get back to normal. I'm like, yeah, things are not coming back to normal. Like first off, normal wasn't working. Just
no,
FYI, if you haven't got that
mm-hmm,
yet. And also like you can't go backwards. Like
mm-hmm,
we're going forward, and we're gonna create something new in the forwardness. And also like let's uh for me it's like what tools do I need to like add to my tool belt to be able to navigate this like forward momentum in a good way and like continue to survive and to even thrive in all of it, and I feel like what your workshop offers is that, you know and so where can folks find you? They want to
yeah.
connect with you and
Um, yes, so you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm much more active on Instagram, and my handle is at Indigo Moon Artist. You can also find me on my webpage, which is www.indigomoonartist.com. And I also have a Patreon page, and all of that is linked in my bio through Instagram. So you can find me there, Indigo Moon Artist. And also just to like reiterate, yeah, like 2020, like we started the year with an eclipse and then a Saturn Pluto conjunction, and then both Venus and Mars were retrograde, and
uh-huh.
then we also had the Mercury retrogrades, and then I mean it was just like everything. And so like astrologers were looking at 2020 for years being like,
Uh-huh.
what is gonna happen? And and
Totally.
2020 is what happened. And yeah, 2021 is also very rich with a lot of cosmic shifts, and then 2022 is going to be really, there's a lot going on. So so this is a great time
Pull up your bootstraps, y'all.
it is a time to do the work. Yeah.
If you haven't been doing it already, let's go.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Xander. I really appreciated this time with you and you sharing your medicine. And, I feel like I just have so many questions that I could keep asking you, but I'm like also, again, like mindful of time, which, what's time? And
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who is listening to this episode. I hope it was nourishing for you. And totally, I recommend you, follow Xander and, look into their work. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day. Many blessings to you. And thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Natalie.
Until next
Thank you,
time.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Cosmic Earth Conversations. I hope it was supportive for you, and please take a moment to like and subscribe to this video and to this channel so you can be informed of the next time an episode drops. Many blessings to you on your journey.